It's not a matter of if the grid goes down, it's a matter of when the grid goes down. Today we're talking with Jim Phillips about that topic and what we can do to be prepared. He's got 9 items to share with us. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene, and we are thrilled today to have Jim Phillips with us again. And he is an expert in all things preparedness.
And been teaching it and living it for many, many years, a half a century or more. Now, I didn't mean that to sound negative because you're not getting old, you're just getting better. But truly, you have lived this and you have experience to benefit our lives. And we're talking today about something that you and I have talked about a lot, and the importance of this, and it has shifted the way you're looking at the information that you're providing. So teach us about that, please.
John didn't tell us exactly what we're doing. Anybody out there know what we're doing today? It's all about grid down.
Glad to do this. Well, let's get it out of the way. Look, I'm an old buzzard. I've lived a long time. I've done a lot of things, and I've had some amazing experiences. And I love understanding how and why things work and then pass that information on to other people. That's really my whole purpose in this. It's not just about me. In fact, that's why you do what you do. And that's why we want other people to learn about this, because it isn't just about them. It's about them, their family, and a whole bunch of people around them that we need to help. So grid down. One of the first things maybe we ought to just establish, what do we mean by the grid? We just go to the wall and flip the switch and the light comes on. And we're just used to that happening. But we have these major interconnects around the country. We have the Western interconnect, the Eastern, and then we have Texas. And of course, we all know a little bit of what happened down in Texas 2 years ago. And that was all about power grid. And that was one part of the power grid out there. The power grid just makes our electricity more reliable, and it's much cleaner because we share the power from all these hundreds of different generating stations around here. So that's a blessing. It can also be a curse, because we're so used to having it and it being reliable, and the power doesn't brown out for most people and it's there. But when we lose the power grid, in other words, something happens, we'll talk about that in just a moment, that takes it out, boy, we're not prepared to deal with that, because we've always had it. Therefore, we're always going to have it. And that's one of the things that's hard to get your head around, is what would it be like to be without it? And that's one of the points I like to make when I talk to people about this is, this is nearly impossible for us to think about, because when we lose the power grid, there goes, well, electric power, but it affects transportation, it affects communications, energy and fuel flow. All those things are all tied together, because electricity is the golden thread that ties this all together. So when it goes away, we're in trouble. Now, what's the likelihood? This thing, it's easy to say, well, that's science fiction, that's spacey, that's can't get your head around it. I will tell you that for me, I'll say it's 100%, but let's just say it's 99.9999%. It is going to occur sometime your lifetime, your children's lifetime, probably sooner rather than later. Well, why can I say that? And one thing I want to do early on is I want to promote to people this documentary that's available out there. In fact, you told me about this some months ago, because I've been creating my own YouTubes talking about loss of power grid, that it's going to happen. Why is it the worst thing? Well, Grid Down, Power Up. Please look that up and go do that. That's a great documentary on losing it. Now, they don't really talk anything about what you're going to do personally, other than trying to promote to our legislators and all to do something about this, because it's possible, but you can't wait for them. You have got to be personally prepared to deal with this. That means physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because when it goes dark, man, that's rough on people. That's going to be rough on us. But if we're prepared, it doesn't have to be that way. So let's kind of go down this list, how that happens to us. First off, it's very important that you understand what I call the base causes it goes away, because if you understand one of these are kind of like 10, 11, 12 different things that could take it out, there's 5 primary ones. If you understood what it is that caused the power grid to fail, then you'll have an idea. Is this something that's going to be a few weeks, a few months, a few years, forever kind of a thing? That helps you to be able to respond at the time. So you're not just in the dark, no pun intended, you're just in the dark wondering what's going on. So you want to have a way of diagnosing that. We don't have time to do that here, but you can kind of figure it out if you'll learn how this happens. And one of the problems about losing the power grid when we damage the equipment is this equipment is made, most of it's made overseas, and most of it has a year to 2 years lead time to get it in when you burn up these big transformers. And so that's why it's not coming back right away. It isn't just flipping a switch. It's like, no, we have to rebuild the infrastructure. Now, many people know something about loss of power in their area. We've had regional things that occur. Back in August 14th of 2003, there was a major blackout up in New England and across part of Canada in there that was really caused by we have a fragile infrastructure, and it was caused by the fact that there was some tree limbs. This is in the summer. The lines got hot, they sagged down, they got in some tree limbs, and there was a bug in the system, and it didn't shut down in an organized way that was supposed to, and it actually damaged equipment. And so it affected many millions of people. For some cases, it was some weeks on that. So that does occur. But the good news about a loss of a part of the power grid is that, well, people come to your rescue. Now, what's one of the things that could really make it tough? Let me actually talk about these. There's a kind of these 5 indirect ways. Overlapping natural disasters. Earthquakes and wildfires and hurricanes all the time. If they hit 4 or 5 sections of the country all at once and do damage in those areas, it could affect the entire power grid, and it could be down for a period of time. We also have things that could occur around the world with economic collapse. People don't go to work. There's no fuel for people to drive, things like that. And of course, one of the things that happens when that occurs is people get really unhappy about City Hall, and so they want to go protest. In fact, they want to burn down City Hall and shoot at equipment and what have. I'll show you how unhappy I am. I'll shoot things up. That won't help. And then we have other things like, war and invasion, which is going on in Europe, which is a really scary kind of a thing. Civil unrest, anarchy, those kinds of things. But let's talk about direct attacks on the power grid. We have operational failure, which is kind of what happened in this 2013, where we had some of the equipment was not programmed exactly right. We had overheating in there. It took out a big chunk of the power grid. We have physical attack. And by physical attack, I mean that somebody goes out and punches holes in these transformers. They launch lead, objects at them. And this happens periodically. If there was a coordinated not a coordinated physical attack on 6 to 9 of our major substations around this country, our power grid would collapse. It wouldn't come back if we do that kind of a damage. There was one of those occurred back in 2013 in Metcalfe, California, where there was a very carefully orchestrated attack to cut out the communications to go in and do that, and then fire AK-27s into these transformers, did millions of dollars in damage. But it was only one of them, and so they were able to route around that. You do that to 6 of those, and the whole system goes down, and it doesn't come back very quickly. You see, across this country, we have some 25,000 power substations of 34,000 volts and above. And then we have a small number of these things that are bigger than that, and they're huge. And that's where if you just attack 6 to 9 of them, you shut down the whole power grid, and it takes years to bring it back the way we're used to it. Another big one that can occur, and this is talked about a great deal, and that is cyber attack. Cyber attack through the internet, through the communication nets out there, and countries are doing that. And by the way, we're doing it. If you remember what happened in Iran, where we got able to get inside of their communication network, got a hold of their controllers for the centrifuges, and caused them to overspeed and tear themselves apart to shut down their concentration program. So people have done that. We've done that. Others want to do that. And if you want to really cause grief in this country, just take out the power grid. There's a really good book on that you should read. It's called Lights Out. It's by Ted Koppel, the journalist. It's well worth reading. It's well researched. He talked a great deal about what could take it out and what the problem would be and how dangerous it would be for us. So I would get that book. It's also available on audio. You can listen to it. So that's a really good one. Now, one of the others, and this is kind of a big one that's been talked about a great deal, and that's using a nuclear explosion high up in space, an HEMP, high altitude electromagnetic pulse. The book, 1 Second After, a lot of people are familiar with that. And I really encourage people, please read that book, not once, read it multiple times. You read that book because it puts a face on the report from the commission to assess the damage to the U.S. infrastructure by high altitude electromagnetic pulse. In that government report, when they talked about that, that's not a happy report. You don't usually hear things in government reports about, well, in the first year, 80% of the U.S. population will die. That's from starvation, violence, and disease. And you think about all the things about winter and summer, no air conditioning, no heat, and things like that. Are you prepared to deal with that? And you can start to see that that would be devastating. But it's all things that you can prepare for, you can take care of. So read that book 1 second after. Go get the report. It's free online. It's 220 pages of printed Novocaine is what it is. But those are very credible scientists and researchers that said if it was really done, it's going to be devastating to this country. And that's one of those things that have been promised by some of our enemies. You see, we're in the way of some of the things that other countries would like to do in taking over other areas. The reason that they're not doing it is, well, we're still here with saying like, no, hands off. But here's the one that guarantees, when I say 100%, sometime in the future, we're going to have one of these gigantic solar storms. The Carrington event level of storms, it was 1859. And the only electrical thing we had back then was the telegraph. And it melted down telegraph wires. It set some poles on fire. Some people were shocked. There were no electrocutions that we know of, but there were railroad ties that were set on fire because of the induced current in the rails that heated the ties so much that they caught on fire. Now, we're talking about a system now where we have millions of miles of antennas out there, not just a few thousand miles of telegraph lines. Now we have millions of miles of power transmission lines and other electrical systems out there that when you have one of these gigantic coronal mass ejections, CME, that induces a geomagnetic storm into the Earth's atmosphere, it pumps huge current into our system. Now, the EMP has when we talk about the pulses, an E1, E2, E3, this is an E2, E3 is what the solar storm is. Doesn't have the E1 component that zaps the chips all of a sudden, but it just comes along and overheats a lot of the equipment and does great damage. So that'll shut us down, and we're going to have to rebuild equipment. We have these solar storms that occur in small areas, South Africa, and I have some pictures from some of the transformers, the internals, where it induced this current into them, and it melted down these gigantic copper wires that are inside of some of these transformers and all, and you look at it like, well, that's going to take lots of money and time to fix. And it does. So you've got these different ways that it can occur. And that's why I say 100%, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to occur in the not too distant future, because 1859 was, well, it's coming up on more than 150 years ago. And it's every, 120 to 200 years, something like that, one of these things occurs. I had a report, this was in a NASA report, that in July of 2012, we missed one of these superstorms by 2 weeks. In other words, the sun launched out its coronal mass ejection out into Earth's orbit. We were just 2 weeks out of phase from that. So if we had been there, we would have already experienced this. I'm glad we didn't experience it yet. So nature can do it, man can do it, and there's different ways that occur. The most important thing for you to do, for each one of us to do, is think in terms of what's the likelihood of this occurring. If you can accept the possibility, the probability that it would occur, then you need to do something about it. Now, in that documentary, Grid Down, Power Up, they give you one thing that you can do about it. You can write your congressman and make lots of noise saying, we need to fix this because we could actually protect our power grid. It'll take a few dozens of billions of dollars to do that, but it could be done if we had the will to do it. But I wouldn't wait for them to take care of it. Yes, write them, demand that they do it, and then go get yourself prepared. Don't wait for them because they may not get around to it, particularly in an election year and some of these things here. There's going to be all kinds of other things going on. So what do you do about this? First off, the foundation for survival is your attitude and your outlook. You've got to get that in place. And the first part of doing this is say, this is going to happen. What am I going to do about it? Don't panic. What you do is say, well, what are the things that make my life possible? So we simply come back and simply say, well, if I've got my attitude straight, I'm doing everything I can to get prepared. Then there's 9 areas that I teach about, and you could break it into more or less on this, but you take a look at each one of those and say, what do I need? Now, this is kind of my order of priority in these 9 areas. One of them is, I call it foundation, and the foundation for survival is your attitude and outlook. It's recognizing the reality of things, recognizing where you are. And one of the best ways of understanding what you need to work on is think about something that causes you fear. When you feel fear, when you feel worry or anxious about something, that means you're ignorant. You don't have an answer. So when you find something, you say, this power grid thing, that really scares me. I feel nervous about that. What am I going to do about this? Okay, there's your fear point. Now let's break it down so that you can go do something about it. So these 9 areas, the first one is foundation. That's your attitude, outlook, looking at the reality of these kinds of things. Number 2 makes kind of sense because it's going to be clothing. Think about this. In the middle of winter, you don't have any electricity. You don't have any more fuel oil being delivered. You don't have natural gas. You don't have coal being delivered, or wood, or any kinds of things. Like your house is going to be cold. Cold houses are a problem, but it's still shelter. It's a nice shelter, but it's going to be chilly in that house. And sometimes it might be below freezing in the house. You have winter clothing. That's good. Beef it up. Get used to wearing that stuff inside. But the one area that I like to talk about is that you need to get good night's sleep. When you're up and active and moving around, your winter clothing will do you pretty good. You probably have some sleeping bags and some blankets, but most of those things will not function long term where you're sleeping in it every night, because the moisture that comes out of your body every night, there's moisture going through your skin 24/7. At night, it's coming out also, and there's a little bit going into the bed. You may put between, let's say, 2 cups, 3 cups of water into your bedding at night. Your bedding, your normal bedding, is not good at handling that moisture. You have a cold room, it's not going to come out of there very easily, so it's going to build up over a few days, a few weeks, and at some point, that bedding is going to be damp enough, you won't feel it, but it'll be damp enough that it transfers heat. Laws of physics. I always like to take things down to the underlying rules. You're using air in your bedding to stay warm, insulate you. So you take just a little bit of air out and replace it with a little bit of moisture. It's a 25-to-1 impact, because water transfers heat 25 times faster than air. So a little bit of water buildup in your bed over a week or 2, all of a sudden, you're now going to be cold. You don't sleep well when you're cold. If you don't get rest, you don't get into REM sleep in particular, then you're not going to be taking care of your immune system, and it's going to be a problem. You're going to be tired. You're going to make mistakes, and you do things that'll get you sick or killed. So sleep, clothing, whole thing about clothing is sleep and everything else. Number 3 on this list is water. Hey, the pipes went dry. Now, if you're on a well, how are you going to get the water out of that well? Maybe you have some backup power for it, or maybe you just say, I'm going to take care of it with having a hand pump so I can get my water out. If you don't have a well and the pipes are all dry, what do? Well, you're looking for water springs and things like that. It might be ditch water. I've got irrigation water around here. That's not safe to drink. And you may have some really nasty water sources that you need to go get and purify that water. And single stage water purification things and filters are not adequate for really bad water. It's okay now in our streams and lakes for the 1 or 2 stages in there, but you may have to be like a municipality. When I teach the water class, they use 6 to 9 stages typically to make that water safe. And they're dealing with clean water. You're going to be dealing with trash water. Boy, you've got to be particular about that. So you've got to learn about that and be ready to take really unsafe water, make it safe to drink. So water is the next one, because you don't live long without water. Then we come to sanitation, because if you get the disease cycle started because you're not keeping your environment clean, you're not keeping yourself hygienic, and you're making mistakes about handling, waste and garbage and things like that, or if your neighbors are doing that. See, this is why we talk about community and neighbors a lot, because if you're doing everything right, but your neighbors are doing it wrong, that's going to come back and bite you. So you need to be helping your neighbors right now and in the future. That's why you want to be kind of a leader to say, let me help you do this so we can live together and not get sick. Sanitation, critical thing for you to learn about. Now we finally get to food. Most people think of food right up front. Now, you do want to have some food day 1, but it's not as critical, because you can actually not eat for 2 or 3, 4 days. For most people, it's not going to hurt you. I fasted one time for 10 days. I wanted to know what it's like. Didn't go without water, can't do that. But I fasted for 10 days to see what it would be like. It wasn't that bad. After day 3, it's like, it's not all that bad. And I did another time for 14 days just to find out what it would be like and how quickly I could recover from things. So you can go without eating, but when you do eat, you do need to eat good food. So learning the laws of nutrition. But in the beginning, it's real easy to have things, I call it expedient food. This is basically wet pack and pouches and cans. Open it, eat it. Get a spoon, eat it. We're so used to saying, well, I have to heat my food up. Why? Well, it's nice to eat some warm food, and sometimes it tastes better, but I'll tell you what, you eat it cold, your body will warm it up. It'll be okay. To begin with, have food that you can eat right now. No fixing required. Just open it up and eat it. Keep yourself going, because you're going to be working on your attitude trying to recover. So expedient food, and then get into the long-term foods. And a lot of the food packages that you buy for storage are not all that good if you really look at the ingredients and understand what nutrition you really need. Then we go to shelter. Well, hopefully you still have your house shelter. If you can stay right there, it'll be cold. And that's great. If you have that, take care of that with clothing and a few things. But if you have to evacuate because where you are is unsafe, then you need to have the portable shelter, or have a place that you're going to where you'll be safe that has shelter. You'll probably still have the clothing issue because it's going to be cold in the winter or really hot in the summer. So understand how you take care of yourself. If you're in Minot, North Dakota, or if you're in Yuma, Arizona, you got a little different things there, but it involves the clothing and shelter and understanding how to stay warm and cool when the time comes. So learn about those things. Then we come down to this whole area, I call it wellness. This has a whole bunch of things about, first aid and being able to take care of medical issues, herbs and vitamins, supplementation, medications, those kinds of things. But there's a few other things in wellness that take care of your head and your heart. Communications is one of them. I want to be able to hear as much as I can about what's going around me, so I can get warnings of some problems and know what's happening out there. Because if you're in an information vacuum, we don't like that. We get uncomfortable about it. It's also would be nice to communicate out to the world, and that would be nice too, but at least inbound communication, AM, FM, Marine, police, shortwave, all those things, and have some quality equipment to do that. It takes a little bit of electricity to run them, but not too bad there. One of the other ones that fits into this wellness area is personal and family protection. And that may involve some tools in there and some supplies in that, because what are you going to do when the people around you are really unhappy and they want to come overrun you? Well, you'll have to think about that, because that's a real wellness issue. And if you live in an area that's kind of unsafe, it may be more important. Of course, that's one of the reasons why you might want to evacuate, and that might be a consideration. So wellness, a bunch of things in there. Then we come to tools and supplies. Now, we've been talking about tools all along. If you have a radio, that's a tool. If you have a pan that you're going to cook in, or a pot or a rocket stove or something, that's a tool that helps you use a supply like wood or gasoline or kerosene, so that I can heat and cook or have some light. So tools and supplies are kind of scattered throughout this whole thing. So you're going to be asking questions in all those 9 areas. What do I have to take care of my life? My well-being is what you want to be looking at first, and then worry about lifestyle a little later on. And if you're doing that, taking care of all these things, the spiritual, the attitude, the knowledge, and the stuff, what does your attitude become about survival? I can do this. You don't have to, I'll say, enjoy it all the time, but you can feel good about it and get on with the process of taking care of your household, your family, and helping some of your neighbors around you. At least that's how I look at it in those 9 areas. And then you have to start asking yourself, well, what do I really need in the way of some of these tools? And some of the things that people don't think about. I recommend you really do want to have some amount of electricity, something that long-term reliable, that you can be using a little bit of power. This is not about your lifestyle, powering your whole house. Yes, you can spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and power your whole house, unless it's an EMP and it takes it out. So you got a problem there. So you want to be prepared with something else that you can protect and use. But what might you want some electricity for? Yes, I have needle and thread, but boy, would I love to run that sewing machine. I would really want to run that sewing machine to repair and fix and make. So that. Now, for some people, it may be life and death. Some people are living on using an oxygen concentrator. That takes electricity. So I'd want to be able to run that. Or if they have a powered wheelchair or a powered bed, a hospital bed kind of thing, or a CPAP, some of those things, that may be very important. You consider that. See, I don't have any of those needs right now. So the medical issue isn't as big a one for me. But if somebody has that in there, that's a life and death situation right now. You need to take care of it. Figure out what you can do to do that. Tools, some of the other tools like power tools. I have a brace and a bit, and I can drill holes with that. It'll take me, 30 minutes to drill one of these holes. With one of these powered hole shooters, I can put one in 15 seconds instead of 15 minutes grinding through that thing. Or a powered saw. these nice quality battery powered ones. I just have to keep them charged up. And maybe it takes me 3 hours to charge, or maybe, well, let's say it takes 3 days to charge one of those tools up. But in the 3 hours of charging and then the 15 minutes that battery will run, I can do a huge amount of work and then let it charge up again slowly. Light. And by the way, yes, you can have kerosene and olive oil lamps, and I teach people to do that. But I really don't want to use those early on because it's a flame. We don't usually use flames for light. And so we're more likely to burn a house down because we're just not used to the safety issues there. And so I want to have light, these little LED flashlights and headlights, and some of them in the rooms that you can get. A little bit of electricity to run them is really, really important. Also for security, these solar-powered lights that will automatically come on when somebody approaches. You see the bad people that are trying to take your stuff or attack you or what have you, they want to do that at night. They know in their heart of hearts they're doing something that's wrong. They know that if there was somebody around there watching them, they won't do it. So have the lights come on, and they'll have a tendency to move on to the dark house and things like that. So there's a whole lot of little things to think about. They're not terribly expensive, and they make a whole lot of difference in your lifestyle, your safety. In the kitchen, a blender, a wheat grinder, something like that, a few of those things. No, you're not going to run your big electric stove. It takes a huge amount of power. But I can do a little bit with my blender. I can grind things and things like that that'll make a huge difference. And here's one that's really important for me. I put it in this entertainment area, which can fall into the wellness area. A little bit of entertainment. For me, one of the most important things that I can use is music. Good, quality, uplifting, calming, spiritual music. When I've been under huge amounts of stress sometime, I wanted to just get the earphones, put them on, and relax in some of those symphonies or some of that symphonic music and just go like, oh, it feels so good to take a 15-minute break. You'll recharge. And so I want to have the ability to run one of my, perhaps a computer or a video player, something like that, a DVD machine, and have that ability to do it. I need to protect those things. Now, everybody asks about my refrigerator, your big, monstrous refrigerator in there. I will tell you right now, and you'll go out and look at things, they say it'll run your refrigerator, but to do it reliably, for most climates, to run your big frost-free refrigerator, you're going to spend $8,000 to $10,000 on a solar system to do that. Most people say, I can't believe that. Come to one of my classes and I'll teach you why it really is that way. Because to be able to run it 24/7 all the time, particularly when you have days and days that are cloudy, it takes a huge battery system, an amazing battery system. And then to recharge those batteries in a day or two so you can run that, it takes a big solar array to charge it up. So yeah, there's some small systems that would run it for a little while, but to know that you can do it all the time, just some things to think about, some little key ideas and thoughts about this. Because I don't want people to be caught like, oh, I thought I could do that, and then I can't, and I wasted all that money. So maybe that'll give you some ideas right there. Just recognize the reality. This is going to happen. Be ready.
Jim, that's amazing. Now, I think that sometimes when we get a list like this, we can feel really overwhelmed.
Right.
And I think that we should address that just a little bit because, like for us, we can't be okay without our community, right? We've got this little circle of neighbors and friends, and everybody doesn't need everything. I am a fantastic gardener, and I have, in fact, one of my neighbors called it the Garden of Eden. And it's kind of true because I've got edibles growing everywhere. I'm really good at that. But there are other things that I'm not really good at that other people are. And as we work together and we all do what we're best at, then we're able to survive so much better. So I think building our community and knowing that we don't have to do it all by ourselves. We don't all need every tool. Actually, our freeze dryers are a good representation of that because we have friends all the time that are coming over and freeze drying food at our house. Don't get me wrong, they're full of apricots right now because we just had apricots come on, right? And that's really exciting, but we can also let our friends and neighbors freeze dry stuff too. It just works out really well because our neighbors are great at helping us out in other areas. And
that is such an important consideration, is the whole aspect of community. Another important thing, I think, is just not to be overwhelmed by this. It's a big list, but we're not going to take it all on at once. But we have to take some first steps and start moving. We have to move our feet, but break it down into small steps, what I call small, steady steps, because every step you take brings you further into a better place. Any thoughts on that, Jim?
Well, you're absolutely right. Talking about community, that's one of the classes that I do, is building community, because we need those relationships. And the other thing I want people to understand is you're actually better prepared than you think you are. Let's say that you're brand new. You're just hearing about this for the first time and you're going like, oh my heck, and it's all, no, you are, well, do you have a house? You already have some tools, probably. Not everybody has tools, but you have some tools, and you have some friends that and so you've got some things. Start with what you have, and then add to that. In all of these 9 areas, do what you can do, and do it. I'll say every week, every day, you can do something, even if it's just organizing things. I can do something. When I go to the grocery store, I'm going to buy an extra can of beans, an extra sack of rice. And so you just keep doing this little by little. Do not slow down. You do this daily. And then, I already mentioned the fact that you're not prepared till your neighbors are prepared, and you're talking about that too. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your children, your grandchildren, and help them understand some of this. Get them to go watch that documentary, Grid Down, Power Up. Because that's critically important. They see that because they do such a good job of explaining in the 4 areas. I talked about more than 4, but in the 4 big areas, they'll take out the power grid, do huge damage. You look at that and just get your head around the fact that, yes, those are real. They could happen. Now I need to be ready for it, or I'm going to be suffering terribly. I've tried pain. I don't like pain. That's the reason I do what I do, because I'm a wimp and I just don't want to suffer, and I don't want my family to suffer. So I do as much as I can. Get your head around that possibility, help other people understand that, and build those relationships. Some of the best ways of building relationships, you've already mentioned that, Kayleen, and that is you have people over doing things with you, breaking bread with them. That is a social thing that'll make a huge difference. If you can have people sharing meals together and talking about things, and no, you don't have to talk about preparedness. Don't turn it into a oh my heck, what's going to happen to us thing. Just talk about life in general, but then bring in some of the other things that are positive and uplifting about what's going on. What could we do to be ready so that we are not afraid of this stuff? I see when you're prepared, even though you're not perfectly prepared, your attitude becomes one, well, I can deal with it. I understand how some of this works. And that's where gaining experience with it. And some of the things that I'm doing and becoming a part of is, yes, we teach people the theory, the book, the video kinds of things, but they need hands-on experience. And that's one of the things we're starting to do with another organization that I've become a part of, so we can get people getting hands-on experience right now at home and then into the field and other places, because that gives you confidence. What you want is to have hope and confidence in the future. Sometimes people say, well, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm in the hope business. I want to help people have hope by teaching them how and why and what. So, and they, of course, they have to make the decision, do something about it. And then they can have hope in the future and simply say, oh, okay, it's not a happy thought, but I can be okay. That's what we want them to feel, is okay. So boy, are you right about that. Critically important.
And now, so Jim, the other thing about this is understanding where to go to get the knowledge and the skills that you need. And I know on our channel, we work on that really hard, but why don't you introduce them to your channel and your YouTube and what you are doing and how they can access your wealth of knowledge?
Okay, what I've been doing is a one-man show for a long time, which is really a pain when you're it, but that's now changing, and I'm excited about that. My website is jimsway.com, JIMSWAY.com, jimsway.com. On that, you'll find a link to my YouTube channel, and then I've I don't know, 50 or 60 YouTubes published in there, and the last ones that I did are all about loss of power grid, because that's what I've shifted my focus to beginning this year in these 9 areas that I talk about, been doing for years, and how can you apply them in different emergencies. No, if you're prepared for power down with the loss of power grid, you're really prepared for everything long term, with the exception of some specific things. What do you do in an earthquake or a tsunami or wildfire, or what have you? But other than that, you're getting prepared for the long term, for the future. So you'll find some of those there. But what's happened here, starting 6-7 weeks ago, an individual contacted me who has great experience in, I'll say, building online communities and things, reaching out to them and broadcasting from remote locations. And he has experience because of what he's done for years in that. He's been starting for the past 5 or 6 years. All of his whole focus has been on teaching preparedness. He knew about me. He took a look at what we're doing and says, can we join together? Bring what I have, he'll bring what he has. So we're starting to do that. And this Thursday, this will be live online, will be griddownreadiness.com. And that's where I'll be focusing a lot of my teaching will be into that area. I'll still keep doing what I do on my Wednesday nights and things and publish things on Jim's Way, but my focus will shift over to griddownreadiness.com, because in there with what Ray is going to do, we'll have these weekly classes, and every month we will have practical things for people to do. And then we will have every quarter, we will have a camp. Not everybody can travel to one location. In fact, we wouldn't want 5,000 people in one location. But he already has the satellite uplink, so we can broadcast from in the field what's going on there with our few people that are there, having them be a part of our teaching. And it can go to you that hopefully you're doing this in your backyard, or maybe on a camp someplace, or maybe you're just doing it in your house. Turn off the power. 3 days. These will be 3-day kinds of experiences. So turn off the power. Well, you don't turn off the refrigerator quite yet. You just tape it shut and leave the breakers onto that. And just don't use any power. Turn off the water. Oh boy, that'll get your attention. You have a flush toilet, right? Now you can't flush it. Oh my heck, that'll get you in a hurry. But that's going to be your reality. That's why you need to do that. So we'll be challenging people to do that every quarter. Summer, fall, winter, spring. And we'll keep doing that, and we'll be plugging as much into it as we can. I'll also be interviewing other people for what I do to bring them along. So we're going to have everything published in there. So come along with us, join with us. And we're not the only people that can teach. We'll do our part of it to help people. So we invite people to come and join with us, be a part of it, and then also teach, because we're going to be soliciting video and pictures and field experiences with people, because we learn from each other. And we want people that said, that was a horrible experience. Now, the attitude needs to be, okay, it was horrible. You have two choices: give up and never do that again. And then when it really happens, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But then go back and fix the problems, so that the next time it's like, well, that's not as bad as it was the first time. And then now it's a little bit better. And then it becomes, hey, this is kind of fun being able to do this. So that's what we're doing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your wisdom and your experience and motivating us to do the things that we need to do. And I'm glad you mentioned that Grid Down Power Up video. It's an excellent, it's hosted by Dennis Quaid, who's one of my favorite actors, and it's got some great information in it. It isn't complete because it doesn't motivate you to do some of these things, but we've talked about that. So anyway, we'll put a link in the description so that you can take a look at that. The question of the day: what information do you still need that we can help provide to make sure that you are ready for any kind of a situation, particularly a grid down situation? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.